Welcome, everybody. I want to take a minute and talk about some of the terminology around invasive species, and some of the terminology that actually doesn't necessarily mean a species is invasive. What's the difference between non-native, introduced, and invasive species? Well, let's start out with the non-native and introduced species. These are species that have been brought into a different area where they do not naturally occur. So they might be moved from a different part of the world, Europe to the United States, or they might even just be moved from a different state or a different area of the state. So non-native, introduced, both are used interchangeably quite frequently. Sometimes we'll hear the words exotic and alien as well. And again, these are just species that are found in an area that they do not naturally occur in. Not all non-native introduced species are harmful. Not all of them become invasives. Some of them can go on and become invasives. In fact, some of our introduced species are beneficial and also are species that have not gotten out of hand and become invasive. For example, tomatoes, petunias, those are some different plants that have been introduced into different areas, both in the US and other areas around the world, that have not caused issues. I won't go into much detail here just for time, but there are also insects or other species out there that we have introduced to control other species as well, that when done properly have been beneficial and have not become invasive. So again, non-native species, introduced species, they can become invasive, but don't necessarily go on to become invasive. So if you see these terms, um, don't automatically think we're talking about invasive species. Invasive species then are species that do go on to cause some sort of harm, rather it be ecological harm. It might be, depending on the definition, because there are several ways to look at this. It could be ecological harm, harm to human health, harm to agriculture. That's quite a bit of the invasive species can be pests for agriculture fields as well. So the invasive species, they will generally be a species that has been introduced into a new area. They can become established. Again, there's a bit of a process, but if they become established, can take over an area causing harm. Again, there's a long process for this to take place. Sometimes it can be faster than other times, but just because something's introduced into an area does not necessarily mean that it will be invasive. Also, does location matter? Yes, location does matter as far as invasive species. There are some species that can be native, non-native, and invasive. It just depends on the location that they are found in. One example of this is a rainbow trout. There are a few places in the western U.S. where this is a native species. There are also, in a good chunk of the rest of the U.S., places where this is non-native, but is not considered to be invasive. And there are some places where the rainbow trout is considered invasive. I believe Wisconsin is one of them that considers it to be invasive. So the same species can be non-native, invasive, non-native to the same area as well. If you have any questions, let me know, but that's just a brief, quick overview of those.